and hopefully earn your support. I want to thank you, Sonia, and I want to thank Sarah, who was one of our fellows this summer. She's amazing. Can you give her a round of applause? We've been all around the state, Sarah, you and I together, working hard. So what I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is just share with you a little bit of why I made the decision to run for governor a few months ago, a little bit about me, a little bit where I think the Commonwealth is right now, and where it needs to be. So for me, really, this all starts with three things in my background that drove me into this campaign just a few months ago in my announcement. Number one, my time in the military. I enlisted in the Navy a little bit after 9/11 because my father was in the military, Korean War veteran. My grandfather was a World War II vet, Battle of the Bulge. Second, my 8 years as mayor of the city of Newton, working hard for the 88,000 people in my hometown every single day. And third is my family. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I've got two children, 9 and 6, and I know where I came from. About 10 years ago this fall, I got a call from my commanding officer in the Navy Reserves, and he told me I was going to Iraq for a year, 1 year deployment. Around the same time, I also learned from my wife, Tassie, that she was pregnant with our first child. So what they do with these deployments, they give you 2 weeks of R&R, you get to come home in the middle of your deployment for 2 weeks, and then you have to go back. The first day I got home from my R&R, my daughter was born. So I spent 2 weeks with my newborn baby daughter and my wife, Tassie, and then I had to go back to Iraq. It was one of the toughest things I ever had to do. Two things I took from that deployment that has stuck with me since that experience. Number one, an appreciation of the men and women that do multiple deployments. I had only done one, some of whom come back injured, some of whom don't come home at all. The second was being on that base, living with, working with, doing missions with people in certain circumstances that had nothing in common with me. People of different races, religions, backgrounds, political persuasions. We couldn't afford not to work together to get through that year. That stuck with me. When I got home in the fall of 2008 to raise my family, I made another decision, and that was to run for mayor of my hometown, Newton, Massachusetts. At the time, Newton faced a $40 million structural deficit, no rainy day or reserve fund, two of the worst conditioned school buildings in the state of Massachusetts, one AAA bond rating that was in danger of being downgraded. So I made a decision to run. A lot of smart political people told me, don't run, you can't win, you've never been in political office before. I had worked in Washington, White House staffer for the Clinton administration. I ran FEMA for New England, worked for John Kerry, senator, for about 4 years, but I'd never been in elected office. I knocked on 11,000 doors, and I won that election by 469 votes.
Yes.
In the 8 years since I've been mayor, we've eliminated the $40 million structural deficit. We grew a rainy day fund that didn't exist to $20 million. We're building 5 new schools in the next 6 years, 3 of which are completed. The next is being constructed now. I just broke ground on the 4th a couple of weeks ago. We've got 2 AAA bond ratings. We're rebuilding our roads, sidewalks, fire stations, and reinstating public safety officials that we lost before I became mayor. 2 reasons as to how I believe we got this done. Number one, every single one of the budgets I passed with the city council were based on outcomes for people, the people that I work for in Newton. The second, I wasn't afraid to raise revenue at the state level. A few months ago, back in, actually almost a year ago, in November, I made another decision, and that was not to run for mayor of Newton for a third. It's been great being the mayor. Done a lot of great work turning Newton around. But as I started moving around the Commonwealth, it became very clear to me that people and communities are falling behind. I believe the defining issue of our time is economic inequality. And when I think about this issue of economic inequality, I think about my own family. Neither one of my parents grew up with wealth. They're both from New York. My dad grew up in Harlem. My mom grew up in the Bronx. My dad grew up in a neighborhood in Harlem that was deemed the worst block in America by CBS News at the time because of the drugs, gangs, and violence. He got out of that life by joining the military. Went to Korea, came home, met my mom. They went down south to college, threw themselves in the civil rights movement, sat at lunch counters and movie theaters across the South to desegregate. And my dad found UMass because he was looking for higher ed. And he purchased the home where I grew up with my 2 sisters and where I live today with my wife and my 9-year-old and 6-year-old with GI Bill benefits. GI Bill benefits. This is a government-sponsored program, an investment for people with modest means so they can make ends meet and ensure their kids can do better than they did. That is not happening in the Commonwealth today, and it is wrong. It is bad economics, but there's a moral question attached to it. And here's what I'm asking everyone in every part of this state to ask themselves, and that is this. What kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? What kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? Are we okay with a booming economy in and around Greater Boston, certain sectors, relatively low unemployment rate, yet at the same time there are people making choices between paying for a copay and going to the doctor and paying for the rent or mortgage? There are people making decisions between paying for prescription drugs for themselves or their family or putting food on the table for the week. There are people that can't afford to attain the credential or degree they need to make ends meet in this economy, being crushed by student debt. I don't believe this is okay. I don't believe it is right. I believe we can do better. That's why I put 2 proposals forward when I announced for governor just a few months ago, among many, including putting in place a single-payer healthcare system in our state now so that people can access affordable health care. The second proposal was putting in place free public college, lifelong, with apprenticeships and internships included. We can't even get to these proposals unless we deal with what is going on with these budgets on Beacon Hill. Just a few months ago, Standard & Poor's, third-party rating agency, downgraded the bond rating in the state of Massachusetts for the first time in 30 years. And they cited the games and gimmicks being played by Charlie Baker, this governor, to keep the budget afloat. There are real consequences to the games and gimmicks Charlie Baker's playing with the budget. Just this past year, to close a $500 million deficit, Charlie Baker cut opioid treatment, addiction treatment funding. He cut transportation funding. He cut higher education funding. He cut subsidies for affordable housing. In the coming year, in order to balance an $800 million deficit, he proposed moving 140,000 people off of Mass Health, our Medicaid program, so it would be more expensive for some of the most normal people in our state to afford health care and health insurance. I believe this is wrong. We need to look at every single dollar in these state budgets and ensure they are being driven by outcomes for people, the residents of the state of Massachusetts. We need to do things like close tax exemptions and loopholes that give away billions of dollars to special interests, have nothing to do with addressing economic inequality in our state, and we can't be afraid to raise revenue at the state level. This is why I support something called the Millionaires Tax or Fair Share Tax Amendment. It asks people making $1 million a year or more to pay a little bit more in taxes so we can reinvest that in education and transportation and infrastructure. All generational investments in areas where we can level the playing field and ensure we are, in fact, giving people a shot, just like the GI Bill did for thousands of families like my own. Before I end and take your questions, I want to talk about Donald Trump for a few minutes. This is really important. Very important. So here's how I look at this. We have to push back against any policy that comes out of this Trump White House that hurts people, that is un-American, that goes against our values. The proposal to remove 32 million people off of health care is wrong. You gotta stand up and say no. The Muslim ban, you gotta stand up and say no. The proposal to federalize police officers is wrong. We gotta say no. The proposal to ban transgender people from the military is wrong. We gotta stand up and say no. Anything that is sexist, bigoted, racist, xenophobic, we have to say no, it's wrong. And never normalize or socialize behavior, tweets, or policies. At the same, and I've been doing it as a mayor and I've been doing it as a gubernatorial candidate. At the same time, there are people that voted for Donald Trump that did not vote for him for these reasons. There are 7,000 people that voted for Donald Trump in the city of Newton. I know many of them. Some of them work at City Hall. I see them every single day. Some of them are parents of kids that my kids play with. There are 93 communities that went for Donald Trump in this last presidential election in the state of Massachusetts. Donald Trump got more votes than Charlie Baker did. We have got to reach out to those people if we're going to address economic inequality, and most importantly, if we're going to leave a world better off for my kids and your kids and our grandkids. We have got to be one Commonwealth. And that's what I learned on that base in Iraq. We couldn't afford not to work together with people that looked differently, thought differently, came from different parts of the country. I believe the same applies in the state of Massachusetts. So look, this is going to be a tough campaign. It is only going to be won by reaching out to people, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, good grassroots campaign, not just saying what we are against, but what we are for. If we do that, we will not only change the governor next year, but we will change governance in the state so our Commonwealth lives up to its full potential. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.